The land has suffered 14 years. The river has not risen. The harvest has not come. Your child is the reason. Every person in this village knows it. Even your own neighbors are hungry because of what you are keeping in that hut.
The morning the village came for the 14-year-old Adaora, even the birds refused to sing. Because deep inside Umuchukwu, everyone believed the girl carried a curse powerful enough to destroy an entire land. But before that day would end, the village would discover something far more dangerous than a cursed child. They would discover what happens when fear protects a guilty man for too long. But this story did not start the morning the elders came. It started 14 years ago with a storm that never should have ended. The night Adaora was born, the rains stopped. Not gradually, not with a slow farewell. They stopped the way a heart stops, suddenly, completely, without warning. And in the days that followed, the crops of Umuchukwu began to die. First, the yams, then the cassava, then the palm trees that had stood since the grandfathers of grandfathers were boys. They did not wilt slowly, they turned black at the roots, as if something beneath the earth had decided to take them back. The women wept, the men gathered, and the elders consulted the oracle of the red stone, a man so old that no one in the village could remember a time before him. What the oracle said that night traveled from mouth to ear to mouth until it reached every corner of Umuchukwu. He said a child had been born carrying something that did not belong to this world, a weight, an ancient thing, and that as long as that child remained in the village, the land would not yield. The child's name was Adaora. Her mother, Ngozi, had heard the words too. She did not run, she did not beg. She picked up her daughter, pressed the child's face against her neck, and said quietly, "They are wrong." She had been saying those same 3 words for 14 years. Adaora grew up in a hut at the edge of the village, close enough that she could hear the sounds of life, far enough that no one had to look at her. The children did not play with her. The woman did not greet her mother. Men avoided the path past their door. Ngozi sold firewood. She washed clothes for wealthier women. She planted in soil that was thinner and harder than any other woman's plot. And still, somehow, she kept her daughter fed. On some evenings, Ngozi would sit outside after Adaora slept, drinking water to silence her own hunger so that the sound of an empty stomach would not wake her child. But the strange things did not stop. In the dry season, when not a drop of water fell anywhere in Umuchukwu, the earth around Adaora's hut stayed moist. Flowers grew in the cracks of the clay walls. A small stream appeared behind their compound, a stream that had no source any elder could explain. The village said, "You see, even water behaves wrongly around that girl." Once, a snake entered Adaora's hut while she slept. It coiled beside her like a watchman. When Ngozi found it in the morning, she raised a machete. But Adaora woke and said softly, "It will not hurt us." She opened the door. The snake left without being asked twice. The village said, "She commands evil things. It obeys her." And then came the thing that frightened people most. A child who was sick for 3 days stopped breathing in the night. His mother screaming woke the whole village. They gathered, and in the middle of the chaos, Adaora walked through the crowd of adults, knelt beside the boy, and pressed both hands flat against his chest. No one saw exactly what happened next, but by morning, the boy was sitting up and asking for food. No one thanked Adaora. No one even spoke directly to her. They only looked at each other with the same question written on their faces. What kind of thing lives inside that girl? Ichie Okoro, the oldest and most feared of the village elders, believed he already knew the answer. He had been watching Adaora since the day she was born, and he had made his decision. She had to leave or she had to die. That was why the elders came in the morning, and the sky turned the color of old wounds. Ichie Okoro stood before Ngozi's door. His voice was completely calm. It was the calmness of a man who had already decided the outcome before he left his house. The land has suffered 14 years, he said. The river has not risen. The harvest has not come. Your child is the reason. Every person in this village knows it. Even your own neighbors are hungry because of what you are keeping in that hut. Ngozi stepped in front of her daughter. She was a small woman. Her feet were cracked from long-distance walks. Her wrapper was faded from too many washes. She had not eaten a full meal since the previous planting season, but she stood like a tree. Not because a tree is angry, but because a tree just does not move. My daughter has not cursed this land, Ngozi said. My daughter healed a child who was dying. The only green compound in this whole village is hers. You have called all of that evil for 14 years. I call it something else. Ichie Okoro's eyes went cold. Remove yourself, Ngozi. This is not about you. It is about me. She came from me, and I will not move. A long silence fell over the crowd. The kind of silence that carries the weight of people who know something is about to change, but are afraid to be the ones to say it first. Then Adaora stepped forward, around her mother, through the doorway, into the open morning air. She looked at Ichie Okoro, not with fear, not with the rage of a child who has been kept at the edge of everything her whole life, with something the old man had never seen directed at him: pity. You know the truth, Adaora said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. You have always known it. You have been afraid to say it because it is your name, not mine, that belongs at the beginning of this story. The crowd went completely still. Ichie Okoro's face changed, just briefly. A shadow, guilt, passed across his eyes like a cloud crossing the sun before he forced it back down beneath his anger. But those who were watching closely had seen it. The truth came from the river itself. That same evening, an old woman named Mama Eze, who lived alone near the bank of the Olu River and never in her life spoke of spiritual matters, appeared in the center of the village square and began to speak. She said the spirit of the Olu River had given her the words, and the spirit was tired of waiting. She said 20 years ago, Ichie Okoro went to the river shrine alone at night. He wanted power. He wanted to be the most feared elder in Umuchukwu, the one every man bowed to, the one every decision passed through. And the river spirit had said no. There was a child who would be born carrying the river's own blessing, and the power was not for him. Okoro was consumed by fury. He had taken the sacred staff that stood at the river's entrance, the staff that linked the village to the spirit's protection since before any living person was born, and he had broken it in two. That was the true beginning of the curse. Not the night Adaora was born. The night a man's wounded pride destroyed something that was never his to touch. Adaora entered the world carrying the river's blessing, the very gift meant to heal the break Okoro had made. The flowers around her hut, the small stream with no source any elder could explain, the child she had brought back from the edge of death. These were not signs of evil. They were the river reaching through her, trying to restore what one man's bitterness had broken. The crowd turned slowly to look at Ichie Okoro. He stood very still. His face was the face of a man who has carried a secret so long it has become heavier than his bones. He did not deny it, and his silence was louder than any concession. Adaora looked at him one last time. Then she turned and walked toward the river alone. She walked without hurrying. The crowd parted for her the way it had never parted for her in 14 years. When she reached the Olu River, the water was grey and low and silent, sick the way a thing is sick when the connection that feeds it has been severed for too long. She stepped in. The cold rose to her knees, to her waist. The current pushed against her like something testing her resolution. She did not fall. She reached both hands beneath the surface, the same hands that had healed a dying child, the same hands the village had called dangerous, and she felt for the broken thing that lived at the river's bottom. She found it. What the fishermen on the far bank witnessed next, they described differently for the rest of their lives. Some said the water turned the color of late afternoon gold. Some said they heard drumming from beneath the surface with no drummers. Some said they heard nothing but silence, a silence so whole and so deep it felt less like an absence of sound and more like the presence of something healing. The river rose. By the time Adaora walked back to the bank, the water was full and clear and rushing the way it had not in 20 years. 3 days later, it rained. The crops returned green within the week. The village of Umuchukwu had called the child cursed for 14 years. They had kept her hungry. They had kept her at the edge of everything. They had let a man's guilt wear the face of her innocence, and they had accepted it.
Because it was easier to blame a child than to question a powerful elder. And the very thing they feared in her was the only thing that had ever been trying to save them. Ichie Okoro confessed before the full assembly of the village. He was stripped of his title and his compound. He spent his final years in the same hut at the edge of Umuchukwu, the same edge where Adaora and her mother had lived through every dry season and every empty harvest. It is said that before he died, he sent for Adaora, and she came. Not because forgiveness is ever simple, not because 14 years of hunger and silence and shame disappear with one old man's confession, but because Adaora had understood something since she was old enough to understand anything, that a blessing and a curse can arrive in the world wearing the same face. The difference is not in the thing that is born, it is in the heart of the person who decides what to call it. If this story moved something in you, if you have ever been called a curse by people who could not understand your gift, like this video and let the river know you were here. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to African Night Tales by Enyinna for more powerful African stories that carry the wisdom our ancestors left behind. Bye!